Hello, my name is Jim Maynard. I'm a retired optometric physician. I live in the Dallas, Texas area now. I retired in 2003. By 2006, I had my first heart attack. Until then, I was in great health. I was running 3 miles a day. I worked out in the gym, and wham, I just had it. And I had a 98% block. Amazing. It had been developing slowly over the years, so I had developed quite a bit of collateral circulation around the coronary artery that was affected, and as a result, the damage was minimal. So following my cabbage that year, or the triple bypass surgery for that year, I was back in 3 weeks to running again and felt great. As a matter of fact, I felt better than I had in many years, and I thought my problems were all over. Unfortunately, over the next 4 years, I had 4 more heart attacks. And with each heart attack and the severity of that heart attack and the damage that it continued to do, I had more pain, I had more fatigue, I had more shortness of breath, and I eventually had to give up running and just walking was all that I could do. And so, I just was looking around so many years for help and talked to doctors, and we tried different medications. I did the sleep apnea clinics. I did all of those things that typically we would do in medicine to solve some of my symptoms and try to find out the root causes of those symptoms. In about 2012 or 2011, 2012, somewhere in there, I saw the Dr. Oz show on TV, which I'm sure that many of you have already seen. If not, I'm sure there's a link to that show here on this website. In his documentary that day, he was demonstrating the use of pulsed electromagnetic field therapy using a Swiss Bionics unit, an older one. The newer one now is the Omnium 1, and that's the one that I ended up buying, but I waited a long time. I was skeptical, and he was demonstrating how the hemoglobin, which is iron-based, could be magnetized, and that separated the blood cells, allowing them to grow thicker walls, hold more oxygen, and just relieve a lot of symptoms, fatigue and pain in the chest and so forth. And at any rate, as I said, I was very skeptical, but I decided I'm going to give it a try. So in 2017, waited a long time, waited longer than I wish I had, I purchased one in June, and as soon as I got it, I started using it 2 to 3 times a day, relentlessly. I was very regular with it. 3 weeks later, I had my first dark field microscopy exam, and so I was eager to see if this was helpful. Well, I'm going to go to the charts and let you see a few things, and this will give you an idea of the 3 tests that I've had done. So let's see if we can get this screen on. And you'll have to pardon me, I'm using my cell phone actually here to record these. But this is the results of the first blood analysis about 3 weeks after I started using the Omnium 1, primarily using the regeneration cycle on it, or program. And you can see that some of these sort of raspberry-looking cells aren't the perfect walls, but they're separated for the most part. They're not clumped together. They have a fairly high oxygen level, which is indicated by the darkness. The white in the centers are areas where there isn't iron or hemoglobin that's holding oxygen. Then this is the same test, the first analysis, and although the top one up there looked really good, and the doctor was very pleased with what he saw in that test. There were some parts of it that were not so great, and this is some that were not so great. Here you can see quite a few of the red blood cells clumped together, and these, when they're clumped like that together, they can't really hold much oxygen. The cell walls are very thin, so they bend and very easily involuted into the other cells. And as a result, that's not a real pretty picture. Although most of the cells are still fairly healthy, so already I had started feeling better and noticed things. The second blood analysis came in October of 2017, about 3.5 months after the purchase and beginning the use of my Omnium 1. And this one is tremendous. As a matter of fact, the doctor that I was seeing did some magnetic therapy in his office for joint pains and things of that nature, and he was very impressed. He was so impressed, he said, "You don't need any kind of magnetic therapy, you're already on it." And this really impressed him, and I think that he's since decided to use those in his own clinic. At any rate, you can see here the wall thickness is pretty great. This is in bright field microscopy. Dark field microscopy shows the amount of oxygen levels in the hemoglobin, and you can see now there are no white spots in these, whereas up here in the dark field, the white spots in the center indicate lack of oxygen in the red blood cells. Then here came the disaster. I decided that what I'm going to do is see what my blood looked like 3 weeks earlier than my first test, prior to my beginning to use the Omnium 1. Well, I found out, and believe me, I wasn't happy at all. Here you can see it, and this is a true disaster. Look, all of my blood practically is totally clumped together. I was already experiencing shortness of breath. My blood pressure had gone up quite a bit to the point where I changed the blood pressure medication trying to solve it. That didn't do it. I was very short of breath. I was fatigued and having to sleep most every day in the afternoon with very little rest at night also. So it's not a really good picture here at all. And I call this the disaster strikes. 3 weeks without my Omnium 1. Then 3 weeks following this test, and I ran home immediately. I jumped on the Omnium 1 mat and I began using it 2 to 3 times a day again. So 3 weeks following that test in March, in April, I had this test. And you can readily see the dramatic improvement. It's back to as good as it was when I had my first test back here in June after 3 weeks of therapy. So I know that this test here, which is very similar to what happened after on my third test, is going to improve to where it's going to look like this in another 3 or 4 weeks or a month or two. So I'm really excited about using my PEMF, my Omnium 1. I love it. It's not just done well for me. It may have saved my life. It certainly has given me reason for continuing to use it and reason to be happy about my purchase. And at the bottom here I've written, I will never, ever miss my Omnium 1 mat again. Never. And I mean that. Don't just buy one. Use it daily.